fellow geeks in the realm of cyberspace. Today we have a special podcast. We don't have Matt with us today. Today we're going to talk about all things cyber. We're going to talk about AI. We're going to talk about security, and we're going to talk about some hacking things. And the check-in question for you guys to think about, and I'll give my opinion a little bit later on, but do you think that artificial intelligence will eventually take over the human race? So let's talk a little bit to start about artificial intelligence and the idea, will AI take over the world? So one of my favorite books on this subject is called I, Robot. It got made into a movie around 2004, but it was originally a book written by Isaac Asimov. And he talked about the laws of robotics. He was the first person not only to talk about the idea of artificial intelligence, but also the idea of the ethics of artificial intelligence. How do we build in laws to robots to make sure that they don't try to take over the human race? And he came up with these famous laws, and you can look them up. A robot should never cause harm to another human being. A robot, through its inaction, should not cause harm to a human being. And a robot should protect itself as long as the protection of itself does not interfere with the first two laws. And the book describes kind of how these three laws go awry. And I won't ruin the plot of the book, but they're not sufficient for the ethics of artificial intelligence. In today's world, there's been a lot of talk about artificial intelligence and around the ethics of it, and how are we going to make sure that artificial intelligence doesn't take over the world. So in fiction, this is used a lot. In 1968, the first story, 2001, A Space Odyssey, that movie came out, and the artificial intelligence at the time was called HAL, H-A-L. People find it interesting, although I'm sure it's purely coincidental, that if you take the letters H-A-L and you add just one of the next letters, so after H becomes I, after A becomes B, and after L becomes M, then HAL actually looks like IBM. I'm sure it's a complete coincidence, but just a very interesting thing. And again, in this case, the artificial intelligence HAL was sent into space, and the people on the spaceship, basically the entire ship was controlled by this artificial intelligence. It was given a mission which required it to lie to its crew, and that kind of messed with the ethics sensors. The HAL, by the way, stood for heuristic and algorithms, two different ways that we can write code for computers, either heuristically or algorithmic. And anyway, this sort of had a crisis of conscience in the computer, and it sort of went a little bit crazy. Another amazing movie on the realm of artificial intelligence was Short Circuit. We're going to talk about number Johnny 5, which was just a robot again. In this case, unlike a lot of the other dystopian stories, the robot comes alive, becomes intelligent, and is actually a good robot and does really good things. But again, the bad guys are chasing him because he wasn't supposed to become sentient. He wasn't supposed to have knowledge of the world, but he was a good guy, but then they're kind of trying to attack him. Another movie and TV show. The movie, I believe, came out in the late 70s, and the TV show is out on HBO now, is called Westworld. And Westworld is an interesting story because in Westworld, these artificial intelligent robots were designed sort of as an amusement park, and people would go in and they would interact pretending that they were in the Old West, and the robots were not supposed to be able to harm the human beings, but the human beings could just shoot them and use them for whatever nefarious purposes, and they use them for a lot of sometimes really disgusting purposes, and you kind of feel really bad for the robots, but eventually the robots gain this sort of sense of breaking their code, giving them the ability to actually attack back the humans, which was never supposed to be able to happen. Of course, you can't talk about artificial intelligence at all if you don't bring up the amazing movie Bladerunner. Again, dystopian look at the future, at the way that these robots were treated, how they had very near or exact human-like qualities, and what happens to them throughout. So if you're looking into what artificial intelligence movies do you want to watch, well, I would first start with iRobot, move on maybe to Space Odyssey and the Westworld, definitely Blade Runner, and then after that you're going to feel like, oh my god, robots are going to take over the world. Of course, The Terminator series, again, all about robots becoming intelligent, Skynet taking over the world. You're going to feel like, oh my God, the world is going to hell. What's going to happen? What you're going to do then you'll go back and you can watch Short Circuit because it's a feel-good artificial intelligence movie. Again, you're going to feel sad for Johnny Five and the way that he's tried to get hunted and shut down, and he just doesn't want to die. So you're going to feel emotional there. But he's actually a good artificial intelligence trying not to take over the world. There's another book out there that I'd really recommend, and I have it on audio, and it's called WWW, and it's by Robert Sawyer. And you might think, oh, it's about the World Wide Web, and yes, sort of, but it's actually about this main character who is blind and is going to gain her sight back through some new technology that they affectionately call the IEYE pod, a little pod that's supposed to help her with vision. And at the same time, there's this developing artificial intelligence on the internet that she learns to communicate back and forth with. And the author kind of remains questionable throughout the book. Is this going to be a good artificial intelligence or a bad artificial intelligence? There's a lot of people worried about it and what's going to happen. And again, it brings this really good story. Now, that hasn't been made into a movie yet. Hopefully it will someday. Robert Sawyer, it's called WWW. You can get it on Audible. You can get it wherever you get books. It's a really good story, and I highly recommend it. So the fiction world of artificial intelligence is all about artificial intelligence taking over the world and what that means and how humanity is going to survive faced with this threat. So do we really have that? Is this actually based on scientific computer science fact? Well, I'll tell you, in the world today of artificial intelligence, we talk about two different kinds of intelligence. We have what's called weak AI, weak artificial intelligence, and strong AI, strong artificial intelligence. So weak AI essentially means that our robots that are intelligent, that are the things that we code in, are designed for a very specific purpose. So for example, there are apps out there where you can put in your symptoms that you're feeling, and the app can suggest, well, this might be some of the potential causes that you might have. And doctors don't like people going and looking this stuff up because it kind of defeats the purpose. Is it replacing the doctor's jobs? Well, no, not really. It's just looking at the data, looking at what you're presented, doing some really neat tricks to try to figure that out. We have other examples that are domain-specific artificial intelligence, like even the computer voice, like you hear on Star Trek, or like you'll actually hear in War Games. Another great artificial intelligence movie that I forgot to talk about, the Whopper, the machine that apparently likes to play games and thinks that there's no difference between a simulation of destroying the Earth and actually destroying the Earth. Again, very good movie. Also came out in the 1980s. And in that movie, there's a scene where they put in a disk and the computer can speak. And at that time, computer voice wasn't very well established. Certainly the ability for a computer to understand your voice when you speak it and interpret it into words and text definitely did not exist at that time. And we have it because of this weak AI, because we created a domain-specific feature that can read and interpret your words and convert them to text. And that is done with artificial intelligence, but it's called weak AI because it's designed just for that domain. And all of the artificial intelligence today that exists today is weak AI. Strong AI is a general purpose artificial intelligence. A strong AI, no matter what you gave it to do, no matter what task you put it towards, just like a human being, could eventually learn and figure out how to do that task, to grow. And no matter what the task, if you asked it to go to school and take classes and get a degree, it could do that. If you asked it to get a glass of water in anybody's house, we don't think about this, but there's a lot of complex tasks involved in figuring out how to get a glass of water. And we could design a computer that could figure out how to do that in a specific house in a specific time. But then could we take that robot, that computer, and move it to anybody else's house and have it figure out how to do it without having to give it any further instructions. The kitchen might be in a different spot, the tap might be in a different spot, the amount of pressure it has to apply to the glass or to the cup changes. All of these things it would have to try to figure out on its own, and then at the same time be able to do any other generic skill and figure it out. And that's strong artificial intelligence. There's a well-known futurist who currently works in the Google team, and his name is Ray Kurzweil, and he basically popularized this idea of the AI singularity. And basically he says computers evolve at an incredible speed, and that's not his. He did the research. Like the speed of computers has continued to increase year after year after year, and we start learning more and learning more. And he's like, eventually the machine will become intelligent, and then will actually become more intelligent than human intelligence. We will give it the ability to design its own designs to increase on its intelligence, and it will sort of surpass us. And he calls that the singularity because it means at that point, the intelligence of the computer will supersede the intelligence of a human being. And that's where people get worried, okay, now they're going to become our AI overlords. And it's an interesting theory, but we don't even have strong AI yet. We don't even have these general purpose machines that they show in the fiction shows, that they show in Star Trek, or that they show in Short Circuit, or that they show in war games. These machines that can do generic anything skills simply do not exist today. And what's interesting is it's a bit of a magic act. In today's world, we talk about things like Chat GPT taking over the world. Because it can replicate a lot of things. It uses an artificial intelligence thing called a large language model. And if you interact with it, it sounds pretty realistic. And if we go back in time, this is also true about every time a new artificial intelligence algorithm came out, from the early days of a program called Eliza to the later chatbots that we have, to the chat GPT that we have. It can fool people for longer and longer and longer. The father of artificial intelligence, Alan Turing, came out with this test, and he basically said, if a computer communicating with a human can be indistinguishable between a human communicating with a human, you don't know whether what you're talking to is human or computer, then essentially it has gained this ability of strong AI. It has this ability to fool you. But what it really shows is, just like the magician's Penn and Teller, what happens is when we don't know how it's working, it's easy for us to be fooled and think, oh, this is really, truly strong artificial intelligence. But when we look at it, when we have an example to examine the code, when we have an understanding of how it all works, it's like looking behind the curtains of how the magic works. And we're like, oh, so it only works in this specific domain, therefore it's still weak AI. And we then come to that conclusion. So if we ever want it to fool people, we just have to hide the secrets of how we did it. And then people are like, oh, wow, this is really scary. It's going to take over all of our jobs. Now, computers and technology have been taking over people's jobs for many years. In the automotive industry is a great example of where this happens, because in the automotive world, there are robots that are doing all the welding, that are putting together all the machinery, that are controlling how things move along the conveyor belt, when things should stop, how things should move. Like, it's all designed by somebody who wrote the code, or multiple people that wrote the code that makes all that work all in a very synchronous way. And so they get all the credit for the code that they wrote, and it's not artificially intelligent. It's just literally somebody wrote the machines that then took away those specific jobs. So there is an actual fear that computers and technology does reduce jobs. It gives more availability to other people to work in different jobs while reducing the scope of things that can be done routine. That will always be true regardless of whether there exists artificial intelligence or not, but it's not going to take away our human ability to figure out how to solve problems on a generic level, on a general purpose level. We don't have that yet, and I don't think that's going to come anytime in the future. So that's artificial intelligence, fact versus fiction. It's definitely out there. It's definitely in our culture to think about computers taking over the world, controlling us all, and making us their slaves. Not something that you need to worry about. Not something you need to keep yourself up at night to worry about. We're not even close to there, in my opinion. But if you do want to look at some information, watch some movies, get excited about the idea, and then look at what we have today, look into the details, learn some of the magic behind the curtain, and I think you'll reach the same conclusion that at no time soon will artificial intelligence take over the world.